What if I told you that the world's most luxurious ship wasn't just doomed to sink, but cursed to vanish beneath the sea in a storm of steel, ice, and silence? What if its legacy wasn't simply that of hubris, but a tragic echo of forgotten souls and ancient warnings ignored? What really happened on the night of April 14, 1912? Was it a tragic accident, a cruel twist of fate, or something far more sinister, woven into the very rivets and beams of the ship itself? Why did some survivors claim to see shadowy figures roaming the corridors, whispering in empty halls, even before the Titanic ever touched ice? What kind of secrets still lie frozen in the trench nearly 13,000 feet below the surface, secrets that murmur through the pressure and pitch-black void, like voices that never found peace? Welcome to the Insomaniac. If you're the kind of soul who lies awake at night staring into the darkness, wondering not just how the universe began, but why it's so eerily silent, you're not alone. If you've ever felt watched while staring into the night sky, or felt a chill that science can't quite explain, then you're exactly where you belong. Tonight, we leave the stars behind. We descend, not into space, but into the cold, crushing silence beneath the ocean. Into a story that's haunted generations. This is not just the history of the Titanic. This is the legend of a ghost ship. In 1912, humanity stood on the edge of modernity. The world was transforming. Industry thundered through growing cities. The air was filled with coal smoke and ambition. Trains, electric lights, telegraphs, man had bent nature to his will, or so it seemed. And in the midst of this progress, one ship was designed to stand above them all. Titanic, over 882 feet long, rising 9 decks high, and weighing over 46,000 tons. Titanic was the largest man-made moving object of her time. Taller than most buildings if stood upright, she was a symbol of mastery over nature, a monument to engineering, wealth, and control. She was outfitted with luxuries that most people couldn't even imagine: a swimming pool, a gymnasium, a squash court, Turkish baths, and dining rooms so ornate they rivaled royal palaces. The first-class grand staircase wrapped in gold leaf, oak paneling, and crystal light looked like something out of a dream. And perhaps it was. But dreams have shadows, and even the most beautiful illusions can hide something dark underneath. Construction began in Belfast, Ireland, and almost immediately, things began to go wrong. Rumors circulated among dockworkers of accidents too brutal to speak aloud. 8 men died during Titanic's assembly, some crushed by falling steel, others mangled in the massive machinery. Only a few of these deaths were ever officially recorded. Superstitious murmurs began to spread. People whispered that Titanic wasn't blessed but cursed, that it was a ship built not just on iron and ambition, but on bones. The number 3994, found stenciled on some parts, when seen in a mirror, appeared to spell NOPOPE. In deeply Catholic Ireland, this was seen as an omen, one the White Star Line dismissed as coincidence. Yet the builders pressed on. Why wouldn't they? Titanic was marketed as unsinkable, a marvel of modern engineering. She could float with 4 of her 16 watertight compartments completely flooded. It was, they said, physically impossible for her to sink. But in their confidence, the designers had made a fatal oversight. The watertight compartments didn't reach high enough. If more than 4 filled, water could cascade from one into the next like dominoes falling or coffins filling. Titanic wasn't designed for speed, but for spectacle. Her 3 massive propellers and 24 boilers made her a technological marvel. But she was built to impress, not to race. Her interiors were fashioned after the Ritz Hotel. Her decks were divided by class. And aboard, a microcosm of the world existed. Billionaires and barons in first class. Merchants and professionals in second. Immigrants and dreamers in third. Over 2,200 souls from across the globe stepped aboard that April, when Titanic left Southampton on her maiden voyage to New York. For 4 days, the crossing was smooth. The ship glided through the Atlantic like a swan. The mood was joyous. Lavish dinners were served. Music drifted through salons. People danced, laughed, and drank beneath the stars. But beneath that surface, the clock was ticking. On April 14, the ocean grew quiet, eerily so. There was no wind, no waves, no moon. Just a still blackness. Survivors would later describe it as unnatural, a silence that pressed against the skin like something watching. Throughout the day, Titanic received no fewer than 6 iceberg warnings. Some were posted, some were ignored. The Marconi wireless operators, overworked and under pressure, were busy transmitting messages for the first-class elite social engagements, business deals. One message from the Californian, warning of nearby pack ice, was even interrupted mid-transmission. The captain, Edward Smith, an experienced sailor on his final voyage before retirement, decided not to slow down. Titanic maintained a speed of nearly 22 knots. Why delay such a magnificent vessel over mere ice? Then, at 11:40 p.m., the silence was broken. A shape emerged from the darkness. A shout, a jolt, a scraping roar. The iceberg struck the starboard side beneath the waterline, tearing open the hull over a span of nearly 300 feet. Steel plates buckled like paper, rivets popped like gunshots, and water began to pour in over 400 tons per minute. Below deck, in the darkness of the lower holds, firemen and engineers felt the tremors first. But above, on the polished floors of first class, there was only a faint vibration. No panic. In fact, some passengers laughed. Some tossed ice chunks like snowballs. They had no idea that their unsinkable ship had already begun to die. By 12:05 a.m., lifeboats were being uncovered. And here, the truth turns cruel. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for just over half of the people aboard. Why? Safety had been sacrificed for aesthetics. When evacuation began, there was confusion. No proper drills had been conducted. Some boats were launched half-empty. Boat No. One, with a capacity for 65, carried only 12. Officers struggled to maintain order. Some drew pistols. Others tried to follow the women and children first rule. But chaos made everything arbitrary. Money meant nothing now. Titles meant nothing. Only space. By 1:30 a.m., the ship was visibly listing. The bow was down. Furniture slid across the tilting floors. Chandeliers shattered. The music, once comforting, turned desperate. In third class, many families found themselves trapped behind locked gates, held back from the upper decks by a system that valued class more than life. Some never made it past those barriers. Others tried to break them down. Panic was spreading like fire through cold corridors. By 2:00 a.m., the bow was underwater. The stern began to rise, angling into the sky. Witnesses said it looked like a giant finger pointing to the heavens. People screamed, some jumped, others clung to each other in prayer. Then came a sound, a groan so deep it seemed to rise from the earth itself. The ship cracked. Right in the middle, the stern lifted, held for a moment like a dying creature gasping for breath. And then it too slipped beneath the waves. At 2:20 a.m., Titanic was gone, but the horror didn't end there. Over 1,500 people were left in the freezing water. They didn't drown, they froze. The temperature of the Atlantic that night was below freezing. Within 60 seconds, the cold paralyzes your lungs. Within 10 minutes, your body begins to shut down. Mothers held their children close. Lovers called out for one another. Some floated in life jackets, alive, only to drift slowly into silence. Some survivors would later say they saw faces floating in the dark, eyes wide open, lips moving in silent prayer. One man swore he heard singing soft, melodic, like a lullaby echoing across the water. No one could explain where it came from. Only 705 people survived. They were pulled from the darkness by the RMS Carpathia, which arrived nearly 2 hours after Titanic vanished. The rest were lost. Some bodies were found days later, frozen in final embraces. A man and woman holding hands. A baby still wrapped in its blanket. Others were never seen again. And down below, Titanic began her second life, not as a ship, but as a tomb. It wasn't until 1985, over 70 years later, that Titanic was found 12,500 feet beneath the surface. When the submersibles descended, they found a ghostly world. The grand staircase was gone, but dishes still sat on shelves. Boots lay side by side. Eyeglasses rested on folded coats. It was as if time had frozen, but something about the footage chilled even the scientists. Some claimed they felt watched, that the ship wasn't empty, but inhabited, that the ocean had kept more than metal. And then the legends grew. Some say Titanic carried cursed cargo, a mummy sealed in its sarcophagus, hidden in the hold. Others tell of divers who reported rhythmic knocking from inside the wreck. 3 taps, then silence. 3 taps, then silence. No one else nearby, just the deep. Some even claim the wreck shifts on its own, rearranging itself between visits. And now, a new terror. Bacteria are slowly consuming Titanic's iron bones. Scientists estimate that in less than 20 years, the wreck may disappear entirely, erased, as if she never existed. As if the ocean doesn't just drown but forgets. So was Titanic doomed by design, or by something deeper? Was it human pride that brought her down, or was she merely claimed by a force we still don't understand? Perhaps both. Titanic wasn't just a ship. She was a monument to confidence. And the Atlantic answered, not with fury, but with stillness, with ice, with silence so complete it felt deliberate. If this story chilled you to the bone, hit the like button. Leave a comment with what you found most haunting, and subscribe to the Insomaniac for more stories that make the darkness feel just a little colder. If you're still awake, if your heart is still racing, and if you're wondering how all this began, explore our previous videos on the Big Bang and the formation of the solar system, both linked in the description. Until next time, keep your lights low, your eyes open, and never forget, some stories sink deeper than the sea.